Okay, we'll now take up HB 46 by Representative Pryor.
House Bill 46 is a proposed constitutional amendment. It restricts eligibility of nonprofit organizations for property tax exemptions for residential property found to endanger public health or safety.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning to members of the committee. It's great to be back home where it all started for me. HB 46 is a very important bill on behalf of the over 4 million citizens of the state of Louisiana. Let me first, Mr. Chairman, members, start out by saying that I value the work of so many nonprofit entities throughout the state of Louisiana. There are many nonprofits that are actually domiciled in the state of Louisiana that do extraordinary work. So this bill does not seek to be punitive to any of our local nonprofits that are actually doing good work. I want to put that out there in advance because several members have approached me just for clarity. The Archdiocese of Louisiana, for example, Habitat for Humanity, and many other organizations do extraordinary work with respect to providing quality housing. This bill simply seeks to do one thing. Right now in the state of Louisiana, if you're a nonprofit entity, you are exempt from paying taxes. We have a couple of bad actors in our state, not many, but a couple. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence right now, we're having something passed out. And in particular, we have an entity that is domiciled in the state of Tennessee that has been on the radar of policymakers for so long. I'm passing out a floor speech by United States Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, who has targeted Global Ministries Foundation. This particular entity hides behind the auspice of being a nonprofit, hides behind the auspice of doing the work of the Lord. But when you look at their track record, which is long and which is lengthy, their track record is anything but doing the Lord's work. If you look at their 990, plenty money. They claim to be a nonprofit, but seems to be lots of profit. And at the end of the day, they are not doing what they are professing to do, which is to do right by people. All citizens, Mr. Chairman, in this state deserve a quality place to live. And so what this bill does, it simply says that if you are a bad actor, you should not be rewarded by the taxpayers of Louisiana. As another layer of protection, if you give me the honor of advancing this bill to the floor, and if it ultimately makes it through the process, it will not be final, because this will have to go to a vote of the people. And so the people will get the opportunity to properly vet this. Entities on any side of this issue will get the opportunity to make their case pro or con against this bill. With that, Mr. Chairman, for the sake of time, I'm honored to have a city council that is an extraordinary partner to me. And today I am joined by my friend, former member of this esteemed body, and our council president, Councilwoman Helena Moreno, who has been an extraordinary champion locally in the city of New Orleans on this issue. And so proud to partner with her, and I yield for her to get into the substance of this bill.
Thank you, Representative Hughes, and it's so great to see all of you. Representative Bishop, so nice to see you as well, my friend. Thank you so much, Representative Hughes, for bringing this important bill. I just want to give you all a little bit of an example of what we've been dealing with in the city of New Orleans. The New Orleans City Council has been moving very tenaciously to deal with housing issues in our city. We have some very problematic apartment complexes that are certainly not being by any means good to the people who are living in these complexes. We have a couple that are in our city that are owned by the nonprofit that Mr. Hughes mentioned. They've recently actually changed their name. They were Global Ministries Foundation, and now there's a new name, but they're still a nonprofit, Preservation of Affordability Corporation. And we have cited one property in particular called The Willows in New Orleans East 40 times have they received guilty violations for code enforcement issues, life safety issues. I have a whole series of photographs that I can even send to you that my office, who's gone out with code enforcement to this particular apartment complex, has taken, or residents have sent to us. The damage is unbelievable. I'm talking about like collapsed roofs due to water and mold damage. One picture in particular, you can actually see daylight coming in through the ceiling. You have horrible mold situation throughout. We have had to go in with code enforcement and actually have to relocate residents living in this particular complex because code enforcement determined it wasn't even safe for anyone to be in this particular building. So as we were looking at this property and finding all different ways to try to go after this particular out-of-town owner, one of the things that I noticed is that they're property tax exempt. And I'm like, I can't even believe it. It's like they treat people so badly. They operate as a nonprofit and they are property tax exempt. And so I went to our assessor and I said, look, you know, how do we get them back on the books? They at least have to pay taxes because remember, if we can send something to a tax sale if you have a bunch of liens on you, code enforcement liens. But if you don't have a tax bill, it makes it impossible to go to a tax sale. So my assessor, you know, looked at this a million times over, even looked at the whole name change with the corporation to see if there was a way to remove this exemption. And he couldn't do it without a change in state law. Now, I'll say this, that this particular owner is not just isolated to the city of New Orleans. He owns properties in other parts of the state as well. And so all that I'm asking you all to please do is just give us, and potentially other parishes, the ability to have another tool in our toolbox to hold these slumlords accountable. And so I thank you all so much for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to pass around these pictures. I'll also say this, that, you know, Fox 8 News in New Orleans has done a whole series of stories about this whole situation and followed this particular owner because he's had issues in other states as well. And I can pass around the different stories also. But it's just been a really terrible situation that we've dealt with, and I'm hoping we can have another tool in our toolbox. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Yes, ma'am, there are quite a few. Representative Mincy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have a couple of questions. On page 3, line 18 and 19, when we define the state of disrepair and manifest conditions which endanger the health and safety of the public, I mean, that could really mean a lot. I mean, is there any way to further define that? Does that need to be further defined? I mean, it could be ambiguous as it is. I mean, what actually constitutes those definitions? Are all those definitions defined anywhere else?
Well, thank you so much for your question, Representative Mincy. I'll say this. So, yes, that's part of it, of the definition, but at the same time, there's other parts of the particular legislation that deals with other I guess, infractions that have to occur. And let me find it here. Let's see. There's a piece about there need to be, I believe, 3 or more code enforcement violations issued to the property as well. And that is page 3, line 20, BB. So there has to be a record, Representative Mincy, of this type of improper behavior. And I'll say this, I think what's important about this bill is it leaves the removal of the exemption ultimately to the governing authority to determine. So for us, it would be the New Orleans City Council. We would have to review all of the evidence presented to us by code enforcement and then remove that exemption. I'll also say this, we could put the exemption back if the issues with the property are then resolved. We could make that decision to bring it back. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about trying to shut down apartment complexes. This is trying to get them up to par, to have them be, you know, good, livable conditions for people. And so I hope that answered your question.
Not totally. So, I mean, look, I don't have any issues with what you're trying to accomplish. I'm just trying to look at, you know, the unintended consequences of it. You know, even when you get back to say in the other additional area that you cited, the health and safety of the residents of the properties. I mean, I just, I mean, that could really just mean anything, any citation whatsoever. And I'm just cautious on to see if it causes any problems. My question is, does that need to be defined more? And it doesn't necessarily have to be defined right here, right now, but it might be something I need to work at going to the floor.
Yeah, Representative Mincy, let me just say, and I certainly appreciate the question. It's certainly conversations that we have had internally, and I will say we have tried to author this bill as tight as possible. I will give you my commitment on the record. Should the committee advance this bill, I will work in good faith with you, our chairman, and any other member of this committee. If there's a way that we can narrow the definition, to tighten it even more, and add additional safeguards, I'm absolutely open to that.
Yeah, and again, I'm supportive of what you're trying to do. I just want to make sure that we're not creating some conditions where it's ambiguous later on. And then the other question I have is on page 4, line 8. Am I reading this correctly? It says that official ballot a printed ballot. Is that how this is being read?
It will be on the ballot, the regular ballot, where voters go to.
But it says
vote.
there shall be a printed proposition upon which the electors shall be permitted to vote yes or no. I read this as this going to be a printed ballot. I mean,
I think it's just general language that staff use, that's typically used, but, again, we're happy to clarify that as well.
I'll help you out on that one. Mr. Mincy, that's just standard language that is put in the bill.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, Representative McGee. Hit it one more time, Representative McGee. I'm sorry. There you go.
Now you got me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first time using the new system as well.
That's okay for a lot of us as well. It's the right button on, by the way.
I didn't want to raise my hand. I actually share Representative Mincy's concerns about the code violation enforcement aspect of it. My concern is that my experience with any sort of code enforcement is it's not as objective as we want it to be, meaning that whoever you draw in the code enforcement inspector pool tends to draw out what kind of violations you get. So if we could tighten up what those actual violations are, because I just wouldn't want a nonprofit, and I'm not saying it happens, but a certain administrator saying like, well, we found four violations and
Broken fence.
yeah, a
right,
broken
right,
fence,
right,
and it's not really
right.
a slumlord situation. They're just sort of abusing the process, and now you're gonna have to pay taxes. It seems like that might be aggressive. And the one thing is, are y'all just limiting it to? And I'm looking at the amendments to lease as housing, so this wouldn't go towards other properties that are not being leased as housing.
Right.
Because I'm just thinking about a specific property in New Orleans that's, I think, owned by a nonprofit that I don't think they want to lease as housing, but it doesn't ever get re-entered into commerce, and I don't think they're paying taxes on it. That I think has a lot of historic value.
Look,
It'd be helpful.
I would look. If you want to go down that route with another bill, I would be glad to support it. But with this one, I would like to keep it as narrow as possible, dealing with properties that are owned by nonprofits used for housing.
Okay. I actually got some properties that I'm aware of that would be better served by the community if the owners would either make something of those properties or
Yeah.
start paying taxes on
I think you were around when Representative Abramson worked on removing tax exemptions of nonprofits on a larger scale, and it was tricky. It
Yeah.
was tricky. But I'm happy to if you want to go down that tricky route, I'm happy to to help you out.
No, it's fine. We can maybe work on that later.
Yeah.
But maybe if we could work on, I agree with Representative Mancini, on just what is an actual code violation.
Yeah, I mean, I really would like to, as we work toward that language, as you all work toward that language, if we can keep it to, life and safety issues, because that's what we have been seeing. I mean, when you have, a portion of your ceiling that is wide open and leaking in water, and your home is infested in mold, when the stability of your building is not even to the point where code enforcement thinks anyone should even be walking in it, like those are the types of code violations.
And I know
I'm
that's what
talking
y'all
about.
mean. And I think I don't see it in here, but maybe I'm wrong. If there was a way that we could do it where, even if you left the language as is, where they at least have the ability to go to the council and say, hey, these are 3 minor violations, and the council would be like, yeah, those are minor. I just would like the property owner not to be at the whim of one inspector and they draw the super aggressive, or there's a vindictive person in City Hall.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, I will again put on the record.
I know you don't even have to.
No, I give my
Representative Hughes.
commitment to the
I
pro
know you.
tem.
I know. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative DeVilliers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rep. Hughes or Ms. Moreno, what was the original intent of this legislation?
The original intent is to not reward bad actors with taxpayer dollars.
The original legislation, though, the actual, I know we're trying to change the law, kind of giving y'all the ability to remove the exemption. But what was the original intent of having that exemption?
What-
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. So all nonprofits in the state of Louisiana receive property tax exemptions. So, and I'm sure you've read through the Constitution, the list of nonprofits are vast. Anything from, a faith-based type of organization to a Mardi Gras organization to a bunch of different types of groups. But this, so that was so overall, those exemptions exist across the board for nonprofits. So for this particular piece of legislation, we were only taking a look at those nonprofits that operate in the housing spectrum. And that's great. If you're a nonprofit, you operate in the housing spectrum and you're doing your duty as a nonprofit to house people properly, knock yourself out, get that exemption, no doubt about it. But if you're not treating people properly, if you are providing such horrific living conditions to them that you're to the point of being cruel, I don't think you should continue to receive that tax exemption. And I think that maybe if some of these owners would be forced to pay taxes if they don't keep their properties up, maybe that would be an incentive to up the standards of the living conditions.
You mentioned not treating people properly. So if they have a beautiful place, they're taking care of it, they're cutting the grass, they're doing all the things in our, I guess, the intent of the legislation, and you say not treating people properly. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's the different examples that we've just gone over, mold infestation, allowing for buildings to deteriorate, and keeping people in living conditions of that particular sort. That's what I would consider not treating people properly. And not to mention that they would be backed up by code enforcement violations. And in New Orleans, the particular place I mentioned has 40 convictions of violations.
So it's not really just for places that are unoccupied, so to speak. In other words, the power's not on and no one's living
No,
there.
this is for those that are actually leased where people are living. Yeah, it's not just for you're talking about like plain blighted property that's not being used for housing. No, it doesn't. This legislation does not extend that far.
If you adopt the amendment, Representative DeVilliers, it will clarify it will only be for entities that are actually being used as housing.
Okay, at the proper time, I'll offer up the amendments.
We still have quite a few questions, and then we'll offer up those amendments. Representative DeVilliers, you done for now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Representative White. I'm sorry, hold on one second. There we go, Representative White.
Well, I pushed my button originally for that specific reason, and I think with some clarification on some of your code enforcement violations that are very obvious, exposure to the outside elements, things that are very specific that affect the health and welfare of people, I think will clear up any concerns that people have that you would have in another city, a city council that might have an issue with someone and look for those code violations. So if you just draw that out specific to things that are just abhorrent for general public, I think that would help clarify for everybody and feel more comfortable that we don't have situations whereby people are doing things out of vengeance, like we say, 3 citations or convictions or code enforcement violations. So I think with that, we'll be able to move the bill. And I would like to, at the appropriate time, make a motion to move the bill.
Okay, we still have quite a few questions and some cards from other people wishing to speak. Representative Landry.
Does this just apply to multifamily units, or would it also apply to a single apartment?
It would apply to any unit leased as housing, so not
Okay.
just multifamily.
Okay. The Willows, how many units were in that? You might have said.
Oh, gosh. I don't have the total number of units, but, several dozen.
Like dozens, not hundreds. Because I'm just wondering what, like, if this Global Ministries, if they had to pay a property tax on that property, what would it be? Like 10,000, 100,000? I mean, would it be enough for them to say, I need to stop doing this?
Well, I can't answer, what they're going to eventually, think. But I will say this, it certainly would help us move something toward tax sale if they had a tax bill. And so
Right.
I think that that's something that's beneficial to us. But at the same time, I just don't think that they should just continue to get this benefit
Right.
if they're treating people the way that they're treating them.
Yeah, because I have something different we'll see here, I think, or in another committee from a different angle. But is it my understanding then that, the calls come in, they go through, find the code violations, which are like tickets, basically, because the fee is so low. And then you get to the third violation and then start this process?
Yeah, well, the way the legislation's written, we couldn't start this process until code violation 3.
Code violation 3. And so then that would go in front of y'all and, we'd see the pictures.
Absolutely.
And go through the whole
and
thing.
And then the governing authority, for us, it would be the city council. Then we'd make the determination whether to remove their exemption or not.
And would they have an appeal of that?
I think the courts would be.
It would go to the
way of
district
appeal.
court and not like to the assessor or someone?
No, it would be the courts.
Okay. That I would like to know a little more, just because part of the problem right now is that they just go on and on and on, and then by the time it gets there, they pay like
I know.
$2,000 in fines, and no one cares. Anyway, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Representative Boyer. 1 second. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Representative Bishop. I like the bill. It's a good bill. I understand the purpose of it. A couple of maybe questions or concerns and maybe ways you can improve it as it goes through the process. Pretty clearly, after talking to Mr. Murray here, you talk about the authority of the municipality or parish. Can you maybe add some language in there where, just because I'm not sure how every parish operates or city operates, to where there is some sort of a public hearing that's and that property owner, and maybe something about the property owner being notified of the hearing so that they have an opportunity, so this just doesn't happen. And it's not just your council, it's any council across the parish, just thinking, that they have an opportunity to defend themselves and be present for this public hearing. And you'd also have residents being able to comment on it as well. So if you don't mind, just think through that and maybe add that before it gets to the floor. And I can help you on that as well. The other side, the other item too, just from the experience of someone who has had a couple of measures fail on the ballot, starting out the bill, do you support an amendment to deny a nonprofit corporation? When you get to Chairman Miller's committee, you might want to rearrange those words a little bit, because as soon as they get to deny a nonprofit corporation, it's going to be voted against, and so just for whatever it's worth. But I like the intentions of the bill.
Look,
Thank you.
we'll take any advice on, on the ballot language. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Boyer. Representative Phelps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the bill. I definitely agree with the intent and the issue that we're trying to address. And I wasn't really familiar with the nonprofit side of it, but we know that there is a profit side from New Orleans to Shreveport that encompass this type of behavior. So I think this is a start. Like you mentioned, we can revisit the other side later, but I think it will send a message for substandard living, which, on the profit side, we just had an issue in Shreveport where it was just these living conditions cited, and the only recourse or consequence for that owner was, okay, I can't fix this, I'm shutting it down. And, residents were calling my office, and, still was a battle for the city to do what they needed to do for various reasons. But I think this will start to send a message to those in the nonprofit area that I think you said it best of treating our people better with standards of living. And I'm sure these are the constituents that don't have anywhere else to go.
Right.
And they are being preyed upon throughout our state. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Representative Farnham.
Mr. Chairman. So walk me down the path of the difference between structural code violation and a health issue. Is it two different departments to do that in New Orleans, or is it the same agency? Because there's human safety and health, and then there's just structural
Sure.
stuff.
So when we have gone out to these properties, when there's a major code enforcement sweep, it's all kind of encompassing. So what happens, at least in New Orleans, what happens is we'll bring in some code enforcement inspectors who may be looking at some mold and structural things. We'll bring out the fire department that'll be looking at some, life safety type of issues, whether the fire alarms for the buildings are working or not, things like that. We'll bring in even NOPD, we'll bring in sanitation. So it's all different departments, kind of all encompassing.
So is the first line of defense to pull their occupancy permit? Is that what happens first in the process? And when it becomes inadequate for human occupancy, do y'all pull their occupancy permit?
What we do when we see a unit, at least in my experience, what I've seen with code enforcement, when there is a unit where someone cannot live, like some of the pictures that I showed, is that the city of New Orleans will work on relocating that one specific tenant. Instead of shutting down the entire apartment complex, particularly in these larger ones where there are dozens, to try to, shut it down and move everyone, that can also be incredibly impactful to families. So we try to work kind of apartment by apartment instead of, yanking it all.
Because from the pictures I saw, there was some that I wouldn't let an animal
Well,
live in there.
no doubt about it. And those are ones that we had to relocate.
And in that, there may be 4 to 6 different apartments that are occupied. And in some of these situations, none of those units.
Totally.
Do y'all have
Absolutely.
the latitude to shut down one particular building, leave the rest of them open?
Yes.
Can y'all drill down and shut that one down, and nobody's going to live in that building too? Because there's
Yes,
two
sir.
ways to hurt somebody. It's on revenue, and then the property taxes will get you to the tax sale at the end of the day, but that should be probably the measure of last resort.
Yes. And yes, sir, we do have the ability to shut down just one specific building. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ogeron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe your answer to Mr. Tarver may have touched on it, but I was like, I appreciate what the bill does and adding another tool in the toolbox to get to the result you're looking for, but I was concerned in whenever this situation happens, what can the city do to help the people, and the bringing in all the entities and relocating those most negatively affected, I think was your answer. Anything else? I mean, what are the other steps that y'all have had to take just as a council?
Yeah.
Let's say, take me to something as bad as the Willows that was not a nonprofit, that was a for-profit that
Yep.
y'all had to do.
So one of the things that we are now moving forward with is actually the state criminal blight statute, because what we've seen, and that's actually to Representative Landry's point, is that we have some owners that they don't really care about the different violations. They go to court and they sit in court forever, and they don't really care. And so what we've been looking at is moving forward with criminal blight violations and moving forward with prosecution of criminal blight, because it seems that once you hit someone that you may now have a criminal record,
Right.
it's a whole different way of thinking about it. So that's actually something that I've really been pushing for. There are a couple of hindrances to the particular state legislation or state law for criminal blight that we're going to be working through this session, and I can talk to you about that later. But that's another big piece that we're looking at as well, is really going down the criminal route.
Is there any possibility that criminal activity or criminal prosecution could remove their nonprofit status and basically be hitting this from another angle?
We didn't see that piece.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
That's all.
Thank you, Representative Ogeron. Okay, we'll now take up the amendments. Drew Murray. Mr. Murray, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, the set of amendments before the committee is numbered 1007-1007 is the code in the top right-hand corner. These have been distributed and are available online. This is a set of 3 amendments. The only substantive amendment is amendment number 3. This amendment revises language on page 3, line 18, which currently reads, "The property is for residential use." The amendment would change this language to read, "The property is leased as housing." Amendments number 1 and 2 make conforming changes in the title, and this concludes the extent of the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. I'm assuming you're offering up those amendments. Representative Villiers has moved favorable on the amendments. Is there any objection? Well, Representative Villiers is not in the room. I'll go ahead.
No, he's
Oh,
right
there he is. Representative Villiers has offered up those amendments. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, those amendments have adopted. Representative White, let me read in the cards. I apologize. Not wishing to speak in favor, Paulette Bailey Wilson. Present wishing to speak, Andrian C. Morris. Andrenica, yes, ma'am, Morris. Wishing to speak in favor, Maxwell Serdulo. And in favor, not wishing to speak, Karen White, Louisiana Municipal Association. Would y'all like to come to the table to speak on the bill?
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Andrenica Morris. I am President and Chair of the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance. And we are here today, we put in the card for information. We are very excited about the amendments that have been offered and have been accepted this morning because there were concerns as you all have talked about, and we've been really pleased at Representative Hughes's willingness to hear how to make this bill better, as well as Councilwoman Moreno's continued willingness to engage around this issue so that we can address the housing crisis that's sweeping Louisiana and getting worse as time goes on, especially when we look at the consequences of poorly maintained properties. This is at the heart of the insurance crisis that you all will be grappling with this session. So we are really glad to hear and to see different pieces of legislation because unfortunately there isn't one silver bullet that's going to address these problems. The only concern that we have, we certainly hope, and we are really excited to hear Representative Hughes hear from you additional concerns that need to tighten up the bill, and that y'all will be working on that through the process. We're eager to be a part of that and to render any aid necessary to make sure that there are not any unintended consequences to this legislation and that it won't hurt the nonprofits who are trying to build first-time home ownership opportunities for people, for nonprofits who can be targeted by unscrupulous developers and unscrupulous folks. There's an incident in New Orleans where nonprofits have been targeted. People have dumping on their properties. There have been graffiti, and that will trigger code enforcement. And so making sure that people are in danger triggers this is critical, and we're very excited that you all took those steps this morning. The only thing that we think is missing from this is a connection to the long-term impact. The intent of it is to make sure that the folks who are living in the conditions that were alluded to that are not fit for human habitation, how do we also get to this to the point that those folks are rendered aid as quickly as possible? And so making sure that any revenue that's generated can be directed towards housing funds so those folks can be relocated, so that the cities and municipalities have additional dollars, because if people have to be relocated and rescued, the municipalities could use those resources and have those dedicated resources for that express purpose instead of it just going into the general fund of those municipalities. So we'd like to see those kinds of changes made to get to the point where people are being helped. And because the unintended consequence is that with the housing crisis as it is, some of these unscrupulous property owners could simply look at the increase in their property taxes and see it as an operating cost and pass it on to the tenants. And say, we're going to increase the rent because we're paying more. Our operating costs have now been increased. And so and some of them can actually, given where the property is, they may even be able to swing this if they don't have a mortgage on the property, if their operating costs are already low. And that's what we want to help this get to, is a way that the bad actors can really be taken out and the people are served. So thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Maxwell Chardulo. I'm with the Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center. We're a statewide nonprofit, and some of our clients have lived in some of these buildings. So we get calls regularly from folks stuck in substandard housing, some of the worst conditions. And just to give you a little context, I think we talked about having tools in the toolbox. Most local governments don't have adequate tools to deal with slumlords. And hold them accountable. That's because most of our code enforcement systems are complaint-based, right? We rely on people to phone in issues, and then cities respond to those. But unlike Texas or just about every other state in the country, we don't have any laws we don't have essentially what is like a whistleblower protection to protect someone who does make that report to code enforcement, calls 311 or whatever your system is locally. They can be evicted for making that call. And so without those protections in place, you just don't get a lot of phone calls to code enforcement about some of the worst actors because folks are very nervous about making that call. And so this is an exceptional situation. I know Councilmember Moreno went out to this property multiple times. The news media reported on it, right? And the fact that it got so much attention, it actually helped stop some of those evictions because there were retaliatory evictions at this property. We had to defend some of the tenants against those. So just to give you that context of sort of like why this is such a problem and we don't have enough tools, some of it is about state law and some of what we're missing here. But that said, this is really about a particular bad actor who is a nonprofit. Most nonprofits are not bad actors. I appreciate that everyone here understands that, and I'm grateful for that. So we're grateful for the amendment and for Representative Hughes and Councilmember Moreno working so closely with us on this. We would also be happy to work on the refining and making sure that this specifically covers like very dangerous health and safety issues. Those are what we want to limit it to make sure that we're not catching up other folks in this. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, also in favor, not wishing to speak, Guy Cormier, as well as Deborah Huden. Okay, the board is clear. Representative Hughes, would you like to close on your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. First of all, let me thank you, Chairman, and the committee for this very substantive discussion. I want to state on the record, I have heard you loud and clear. This still has to go to civil law before it hits the floor. And I give you my commitment. I will work with Representative Mincy, our pro tem, Representative Boyer, and anyone else that would like to help me bring further clarity and narrow this bill to seek to do what we want to do. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say this. This bill really doesn't benefit me in any way possible. It does not benefit my family. You have a letter from Miss Sierra Dobard, who could not be here today. She has a master's degree. She's a professor. She's cultivating our next generation of talent. You'll see in her letter she uses words like stuck. Members, there are people in these units that are stuck. And if they had somewhere else to go, and if they could afford to go somewhere else, they would. But they can't. And it's unconscionable. Do I think this will solve all the world's problems? I don't. But since the landlord is not advocating on their behalf, Council Vice President Moreno and I said maybe we should try to do something to help be a voice for them so that they don't feel stuck. And so that when they go to bed, like I do, and I breathe clean air, maybe they can too. And so, members, all this simply seeks to do, if the voters decide, if we advance this to the ballot, is to simply put another tool in the toolbox to not reward bad actors for doing what they promise to do. I pledge to work with you and any other advocate and anyone to make this bill better. Chairman, as always, I thank you, and I ask that we report this favorable.
Okay, Representative White was not in the room. Representative Willard. Representative White's in the back. Representative White has offered up HB 46 as amended. Is there any objection? See no objection. HB 46 is reported as amended.
Thank you, members.
Madam